All right. I'm Bubble, also known as Ali Wurds. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and I've worked with and written about Prometheus Rising over the past 5 years. Last week we read Chapter 7, The Time-Binding Dialectic, Acceleration and Deceleration. If you missed it, look it up on our YouTube channel. So this is Chapter 8, and it'll be page 121 in the PDF that I'm using. All right. So this is called the Moral Socio-Sexual Circuit. Then we have a quote from William Blake in his Marriage of Heaven and Hell. As the caterpillar chooses the fairest leaves to lay her eggs on, so the priest lays his curse on the fairest joys. Below we see an image of, it's hard to tell exactly what that is, but it's a doctor or a bureaucrat, and there's a person there on a conveyor belt that they stamped. Some of the images are hard to see in this. They stamped a word on the person's forehead. Oh, approved. Okay. I see. It's probably a psychiatrist or something. So good programming makes good neighbors. All right, and then they're going off to shipping an assignment. For those of you who are new, Robert Anton Wilson makes repeated use of the idea of people being biological computers. They're kind of like robots. And then the different thought patterns you have are like mental programs. And if you are not as aware of those programs as you could be, you have a tendency to behave robotically or predictably. And if you maintain awareness of these different circuits, or you could model in a different way yourself, the different kinds of mental patterns you have, you behave less robotically and perhaps more authentically, whatever that may mean. All right. So now we're on page 123 because there was a blank page. The socio-sexual circuit is activated and imprinted at adolescence when the DNA signal awakens the sexual apparatus. The teenager becomes the bewildered possessor of a new body and a new neural circuit oriented to orgasm and sperm-egg fusion. The pubescent human, like any other rutting animal, lurches about in a state of mating frenzy, every call gasping for the sexual object. Imprint vulnerability is acute, and the first sexual signals to turn on the adolescent nervous system remain fixed for life and forever define the individual's sexual reality. We should not be surprised, therefore, at the various fetishes that are so easily acquired at these sensitive moments. In fact, we can tell precisely at what period in time a person was sexually imprinted by noticing which fetishes continue to turn him or her on. Black garters, booze, cool jazz, and crew cuts define the sexual signals of one imprint group, generation, just as rigidly as sleeping hags, marijuana, heavy rock, and tight jeans define another. As Masters and Johnson have pointed out, most sexual dysfunctions are hooked into the nervous system at the adolescent moment of acute imprint vulnerability. Their archetypal case is that of a male who, about to mate for the first time in the back seat of a car, was traumatized by a policeman flashing a light on him and his paramour. The imprint of that ghastly moment was hooked for decades. The male remained impotent until re-imprinted by Masters and Johnson in their clinic. The choices of heterosexuality or homosexuality, rash promiscuity, or timid celibacy, etc., are usually imprinted by exactly similar accidents at points of imprint vulnerability. So I just want to pause for a second and discuss that this book is kind of old. So there may be especially scientific claims that are not currently in vogue or accepted, or maybe are contested in different ways. So Robert Anton Wilson himself would tell you not to necessarily agree with everything that he says, to consider for yourself. Just as biosurvival anxiety or security are imprinted by accidents in the nursing period, emotional domination or submission by accidents in the toddling period, symbolic dexterity or stupidity by the accidents of the learning environment. Primitives, so-called, know these facts and surround all the points of imprint vulnerability with rituals, ordeals, rites of passage, that are well designed to imprint the desired traits of a well-integrated member of that tribe at that time. Relics of these imprint ceremonies survive in baptism, confirmation, bar mitzvahs, marriage ceremonies, the Masonic raising, etc. It is important to realize that chance, genetics, and malice, anger, are among the accidents that create imprints at the points of vulnerability. Most humans do not, due to accidents of this sort, imprint exactly the socio-sexual role demanded by their society. The fourth circuit can almost be called the guilt circuit. Almost everybody, almost everywhere, is quite busy hiding their real sexual profile and miming the accepted sex role for their gender in their tribe. In ordinary language, the imprint on the socio-sexual circuit is generally called the mature personality or the sexual role. It is the parent in the jargon of transactional analysis. It is amusing to note that Freud recognized the first circuit as the oral stage, the second as the anal stage, and the fourth as the genital stage. He did not notice the third semantic circuit, perhaps because as an obsessive rationalist he was so absorbed in the verbal and conceptual programs that they were invisible to him as water may be to fishes. Similarly, Jung described the first circuit as the sensational faculty, the second as the feeling faculty, the third as the rational faculty, and skipped the socio-sexual circuit entirely. There may be a clue here as to why Jung could not abide Freud's fourth circuit emphasis, and built a separate, less sexual psychology of his own. Jung then went on to lump all the higher circuits under the rubric of the faculty of intuition. It is the function of the nervous system to focus, to select, to narrow down, to choose from an infinity of possibilities. The biochemical imprints which determine the tactics and strategies that ensure survival in one place, status in one tribe. The infant is genetically prepared to learn any language. So Jung described all of the higher circuits as intuition. And then we said that the nervous system helps us to focus or narrow down from an infinite possibilities of biochemical imprints that determine the tactics and strategies that ensure survival in one place, status in one tribe. So he's talking about how your imprinting is always contextual. All right. The infant is genetically prepared to learn any language, master any skill, play any sex role. In a very short time, however, he or she becomes mechanically, robotically fixated to accept, follow, and mimic the limited offerings of his social and cultural environment. In this process, each of us pays a heavy price. Survival and status mean forfeiting the infinite possibilities of unconditioned consciousness. The domesticated primate, inside the social reality tunnel, is a trivial fragment of the potentials for experience. A trivial fragment for the potentials for experience and intelligence innate in the it's a really big number and it's missing a comma. So looks like that might be 110 trillion cell human biocomputer. So as Robert Heinlein wrote, a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, design a building, con a ship, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve an equation, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. But as long as we remain on the antique circuits, that we are not that much different from the insects. That is, just as the insects repeat their four-stage program, egg, larvae, chrysalis, adult, from generation to generation, we repeat our four-stage cycle also. The antique circuits are genetically conservative. They ensure the survival and continuation of the species, but do no more. For future evolution, we must look to the futuristic circuits. All right, and we have another image here showing an ant here. He's specializing. This one looks like it might also be alluding to specialization of workers in factories. It's not as much relevant anymore with increased automation, but it was often the case people had assembly line jobs where their whole job was literally just to turn a single bolt on a car or something as it goes down the assembly line. Thankfully, we have machines to do that more now. All right. And then we have another picture. Yep. All right, so there's a summary here. And then after this summary, we're going to go back and recap some of the other stuff we just talked about. So circuit 1, he's saying that the origin of this was 3 to 4 billion years ago. And the imprint sites are the limbic and autonomic nervous system. I don't see him mentioning the parasympathetic nervous system, but yeah. So Freud called it the oral psychology, oral imprinting. For Jung, it was sensation. For Berne, it was the natural child. For Sagan, the reptile brain. And for Gurdjieff, the movement center. Second circuit, again, this is just his claim, estimation. This may be developed 500 to 1,000 million years ago. And he says this is associated with the thalamus and the muscles. For Freud, it was the anal stage. For Jung, it was feeling. For Berne, it was the adapted child. For Sagan, the mammal brain. For Gurdjieff, it was the false emotion center. Circuit 3, 100,000 years ago. So the left cortex, remember that he talked about the right and the left brain as one way to think about consciousness and personality types. The larynx and the right hand. Remember that the hookup between your brain and the side of your body is reversed. For Freud, this was latency. Jung, reason. Berne, adult computer. Sagan, the human brain. For Gurdjieff, the false intellect center. And then the fourth circuit, the one we're talking about now, 30,000 years ago. The left neocortex, the breasts and genitals. For Freud, it was phallic. Jung, it was ignored. He didn't really talk about it much. For Berne, it was the parent. For Sagan, he also ignored it. And for Gurdjieff, the false personality. All right. Let's do a quick recap. I guess we didn't get through that much, but it's still a lot of stuff. So he is talking about how for this circuit, it is when you are imprinted at various important moments of vulnerability, influences your sexuality. And for Robert Anton Wilson, he claims that, so Freud had the concept of polymorphous perversity, that the infant started as a blank slate, tabula rasa, and that at various moments it's imprinted. And Robert Anton Wilson thinks that this circuit starts out almost entirely blank and is almost entirely formed by just those moments of vulnerability. Imprint vulnerability on page 123 is acute, and the first sexual signals to turn on the adolescent nervous system remain fixed for life. So he's suggesting that whatever things arouse a person first have a very strong impact on how their sexuality develops. He does also mention that the DNA signal awakens the sexual apparatus during puberty, so he is saying that that's a component as well. But I would also imagine that the events surrounding your first sexual experience, or maybe your first kiss or things like that, those would have a strong, lasting impact. All right, so that summary chart is at the top of page 126. Below it says, "It is sometimes mistakenly stated that there are no universal sexual taboos. This is not true. There is one omnipurpose taboo which exists in every tribe. That taboo stipulates that sexuality shall not be unregulated by the tribe. That is, even though no other taboos are universal, the taboo against living without taboos remains constant. Every tribe has its own set of verbots and thou shalt nots, but no tribe allows the individual to choose his or her own set. An American president may not marry his own sister if he wants to get reelected. An Egyptian pharaoh had to marry his own sister. Confronted by this moral relativism, many social scientists have failed to notice the invariable. Both the president and the pharaoh are expected to obey local rules. So are the Samoan, the Russian, the Eskimo, and the Cuban. Why is there this taboo against sexual self-definition and self-actualization? Why is it that while no two societies can agree on what is sexually good, in quotes, and sexually bad, again in quotes, every society thinks that it must make some definition? And there's a footnote that I overlooked for Gurdjieff in that chart. It says the Gurdjieff titles are deliberately negative, since he was trying to get people off of these primitive circuits and into the futuristic circuits. Okay, on to page 127. The answer is that our first humanoid, symbolizing and conceptualizing, ancestors were very ignorant, but not all stupid. They were ignorant of the laws of genetics, but they were smart enough to suspect that such laws exist. Sperm-egg fusion is surrounded by violent taboos and fierce tribal conformity because the survival and future evolution of the gene pool depends upon which particular spermatozoa reaches which particular ovum. Etymologists confirm the Freudian theory that there are ancient languages between the words for the sacred and the erotic, the obscene, the awe-inspiring, the awful, as in full of awe, the divine, the thrilling. All of these are primitive, powerful, physiological responses to the mysteries of sexual attraction, mating, reproduction, inheritance, genetic drift, future evolution. The earliest god forms found by archaeologists are pregnant goddesses and ithiphallic gods. The most intolerant, bigoted, and recalcitrant of all prejudices, the very last to fade away after cosmopolitanizing contact with other tribes having different values, are the taboos concerning the right way to reproduce. If one nation insists that the head of state must marry his sister, and another insists that he must not, both are acting on the assumption that the right way must be found and rigorously enforced. There are unknowns in the area of sexual attraction. He likes her, but she doesn't like him. There are unknowns in the area of mating. A young couple can make love once, and the woman becomes pregnant. Yet another couple makes love for 3 years, and the woman remains barren. Very puzzling and frightening for primitives in New Guinea or New Jersey. That brings us to another picture. This says, gods and goddesses are sexual and genetic programs expressed in primitive symbols. Here you'll see that he's holding a thunderbolt, which is, I'm not familiar with Sanskrit, but that's a symbol that shows up a lot in Indian influenced traditions, and you'll see that he's holding a club, which is itself a phallic symbol. He's horned. A lot of horned gods have phallic symbol going on with them as well. And I don't know, I think that collar might have a sun on it. The sun is often thought of as a masculine energy because it sends out light and heat. And the satyr legs also point back to Pan. All right, on page 129, there are unknowns in the area of reproduction. Why twins? Why 3 boys in one family and 3 girls in another? Why are there miscarriages and stillbirths? There are unknowns in the area of inheritance. Why doesn't my son look like me? Many a domesticated primate has wondered uneasily, leading to a great deal of paranoia and male chauvinism. There are unknowns in the area of genetic drift. Modern researchers recognize 12 or more variables, but still have more questions than answers. There are unknowns in the area of future evolution. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? The title of Gauguin's greatest painting is the basic ontological question, the totem pole. Like the treatise on sociobiology, it is an attempt to answer. Amid all these unknowns of sexual attraction, mating, reproduction, inheritance, genetic drift, future evolution, the shamans of every tribe try to establish guideposts to tribal gene pool survival. Thus, morality, again in quotes, is invented. And this brings us to our next picture. All right, morality or local taboos, you can see it's pointing towards those first 3 categories, or perhaps to the spaces between them. I'm not sure, that's probably intentional. And perhaps inheritance, genetic drift, and future evolution are the result of the way that the local taboos or morality interacts with those first 3 categories. So morality is a way to control inheritance, genetic drift, future evolution, and of course other things as well. Sexual attraction, mating, reproduction, inheritance, genetic drift, and future evolution are all stochastic processes. That is, processes in which out of a random series, some intelligence, or something that can be metaphorically conceived of as intelligence, is selecting a final outcome. That these stochastic processes overlap, as shown in our diagram, is intuitively obvious, and it is also obvious that the future is being selected every step of the way. This brings us to a footnote. So the footnote says that the whole chain is intelligent or manifests intelligence is the Lamarckian heresy which Darwinians have never quite been able to kill. Every time it is buried, it rises again in a new form. The 2 most able recent arguments of the neo-Lamarckian or meta-Lamarckian position, which the reader is cordially urged to read, are Timothy Leary's The Game of Life and Gregory Bateson's Mind and Nature. A quick, I guess, oversimplification of Lamarckianism and Darwinism. Yeah. All right. So you all are probably familiar with Darwin's theory of natural selection. which it wasn't a theory of evolution, it was a theory of natural selection, which is that genetic drift occurs because, at least in animals, of natural disasters or geography, weather. He would suggest that the less fit individuals would reproduce less, and the individuals that were more well adapted to their environment, at least up to the point of rearing children, would produce more children and their genes would get passed on. Lamarckianism suggested that genetic traits were actually created. So like maybe giraffes have long necks because they keep reaching up, and as they stretch their necks up, an individual giraffe's neck gets longer, and it passes on that trait it developed in its own lifetime to its children. I don't know exactly when epigenetics was discovered, but the reality is that it's a combination of things. It's been demonstrated that if you smoke cigarettes, it changes some of your genetic markers, it flips them on or off, and then the new state induced by consuming tobacco can get passed on to your children. Also, especially early childhood stress or stress during pregnancy. So it's a combination of both. All right, so that was footnote 1. Let's jump back up. And it says, taboo and morality are tribal attempts to govern the random element to select the desired future. Morality attempts to control the stochastic evolutionary process at 2 points, interfering between sexual attraction and sexual consummation, mating, by taboos and commandments, or else interfering with mating and reproduction. The later case is represented by infanticide, a widespread birth control measure always justified by the local shamans on magical grounds. E.g., the infants selected for sacrifice are breech births, or birthmarked, or twins, or in some way stigmatized by the gods. The actual function of such practices, of course, is population control. And such customs are most common on isolated islands where runaway population would be a disaster. Similarly, the Judaic taboos functioned to channel all sexuality into increased population, since the ancient Jews were surrounded by large and pugnacious empires, eager to conquer them. They needed more boys for soldiers and more girls to breed soldiers. The most idiotic and superstitious taboos from the rationalist viewpoint always had some function when invented. For instance, the most pointlessly elaborate non-genetic incest taboos, in which virtually everybody in the tribe becomes unavailable sexually to everybody else, force exogamy, marriage outside of the tribe. This creates affectional alliances, family ties, between tribes and decreases warfare. Something like this primitive exogamy survived into very recent times in the custom of marrying one royal family to another. Every form of morality is, of course, irksome on some level to everybody, because no individual ever has exactly the sexual imprint desired by the tribe. The more sophisticated totem cults, the higher religions, so dubbed by themselves, take account of this by the doctrine of atonement. In one form or another, this allows the individual to be ritually forgiven periodically for not being the perfect sexual robot decreed by tribal morality. This becomes hilarious only when one realizes that most of what domesticated primates are asking their priests to forgive them for consists of what Kinsey so accurately called normal mammalian behavior. We have a footnote, and then there'll be an image. The footnote says, this only refers to the silly and inferior religions of other people, of course, and has no reference to the sublime truths of the reader's own religion. All right, and then here we see, perhaps it's a caveman, but there's a person kneeling and praying, and it says, "O Mighty One, please forgive me for wanting to fulfill my biological purpose." All right, we'll go one more page, and then we'll pause again. So it says, time binding, the transmission of symbols and tools across generations, begins on the third circuit. Acute consciousness time is, however, intensified on the fourth circuit. The principal function of the socio-sexual circuit in the higher primates is to form an adult personality, a parent. We have a footnote there. Homosexuality, like left-handedness, is probably included in the genetic script to serve auxiliary functions. In most primitive societies, the homosexuals and the left-handed are shunted into shamanic roles. In more complex societies, they are, like spinsters and heterosexual bachelors, usually shunted into intellectual or artistic roles, which have quasi-shamanic functions of making, breaking, or transforming cultural signals. Those who claim any perennial sexual variation is against nature are underestimating nature's variety, diversity, and economy. The mutation of Leonardo da Vinci, a left-handed homosexual, was needed to break up the signal of the dying medieval reality tunnel and make our perceptions into the reality tunnel of post-Renaissance scientific humanism. His success is registered by the fact that a Leonardo painting is still the norm of what we mean by realism, i.e., that most people, including right-handed heterosexuals, are living in the scientific humanist space this man invented. It's worth pointing out here that Leonardo da Vinci was actually born right-handed, and he had some sort of strange affliction that paralyzed his right hand. Then he spent a year or two learning to do everything left-handed, including writing and drawing, and by the time he had become proficient with his left hand, his right hand had healed up, and that was the point at which he became ambidextrous. This actually is interesting because it relates to Crowley requiring all of his followers, I guess we can say, to learn to write left-handed, which Robert Anton Wilson does reference in the chapter on the right brain and the left brain. All right, he was apparently bisexual though, so it's not entirely inaccurate here. All right, okay, so the principal function of the socio-sexual circuit in the higher primates is to form an adult personality, a parent. That's where the footnote was. By definition, the parent is one who cares for the young of the species. By genetic necessity, the parent also cares about the young. In symbolizing humans, this means planning, hoping, and having aspirations. In the language of the mystics, this means being attached and trapped on the wheel of karma. The first effort, in most mystical traditions, is to break this fourth circuit attachment by taking a vow of celibacy. The fourth circuit is located in the left neocortex, the newest part of the left hemisphere of the brain. It is linked neurologically with the genitalia and the breasts, fucking, hugging, embracing, protecting circuitry. Persons who take their heaviest imprint on this circuit are beautiful. That is, their entire body has received so many sexual neurotransmitters from the brain that they are constantly radiating the attractive mating signals that make up our perception of what a beautiful human being is. According to accidents of imprinting, they can be coldly calculating exploiters, totally repressed Puritans, or carry some other negative traits, but they always look like, send the signals of, the ideal fucker, lover, protector. Once formulated, morality serves as not only a check on genetic drift, but a brake against Circuit 3 innovation. The shamans, priests, etc. define which ideas are moral and which are immoral. Anything new, anything that will break the tribal cycle, i.e. take us out of the cyclical mythic time into linear progressive revolutionary time, is usually defined very quickly as immoral. And I guess let's finish this page and we'll pause and recap. To say that religion and priestcraft have played a conservative role in history is an understatement. One might say, as well, that the bubonic plague has killed a few people, or that Hitler was a little bit strange. The chief role of religion has always been reactionary. This is its evolutionary function in the dialectic of circuitry of the brain. Circuit 3, unchecked, is like a cocaine monologue. You can't remember anything because everything is changing too fast. This is profoundly disorienting to the average domesticated primate, so the tribal moralists keep stability and tranquility by acting as decelerators. The average person, similarly, is philosophically most open and curious before the adult sex role of parenthood is elected. After reproduction, there is little time for Circuit 3 speculations, and because of the sanctions every tribe places upon heresy, i.e. new ideas, there's also little inclination. This Circuit 3 tends to take us out of the tribal cyclical time into linear progressive time, but Circuit 4 loops us back into the cycle again. Homosexuals may or may not be the chief creators of cultural innovation, as some gay pride advocates claim, but it is certainly true that they have done more than their share. The reason? They are not trapped into parent roles. These 4 circuits are coded with 4 permutations of each into the court cards of the tarot decks. Thus, the Knight of Discs, representing Earth, according to the occultists, is the first pure first circuit type, all sensation, all oral demand, all viscerotonic. Behind their alchemical, kabbalistic, theosophical jargon, most books on tarot are describing this type when they discuss this part, the pure, undiluted mama's boy. That brings us to a picture, and we will pause. Alright, so what he's suggesting is that culturally, the priest caste, the people that use the fourth circuit to intentionally manipulate the development of culture. You can see a little bit of that here. Have a tendency to act as a decelerating mechanism, because if you have people that are constantly coming up with new ideas or changing things, it just doesn't ensure survival of the species or the tribe or whatever it is you're talking about. And that's a theme throughout the book, is that those first three circuits, they pretty much just ensure survival of the group. The fourth circuit is often used as a way to keep the other circuits in line, especially the third circuit, because if you look, he describes the third circuit, that's the time-binding circuit. It's important for passing information from generation to generation. But if you get caught up in what he calls a cocaine monologue, where you don't remember anything, it's sort of like an altered state. You end up producing all this information. It pulls you out of culture, so to speak. The job of philosophers, in a sense, depending on what kind of philosophy they're doing, and magicians and artists, is often to exit culture, to look at it from the outside and then come back in. Depending on how you do that, it can be disruptive. Models you could create about how the different circuits relate to each other. But you'll often find that each circuit can be thought of as a way to control some of the other ones. I think there's a repeating pattern of each group of four circuits also. So the first circuit is just about yourself and your own safety, the biosurvival circuit. The second circuit is about your ranking in terms of others. So it's still about safety in a way, but it's about how other people's safety and your own safety in relation to them. It's kind of like a meta-level awareness of the first circuit. Everybody else has their own stuff going on. And who do you fit in with? Where do you fit in? The third circuit can be thought of as a way to transmit information from generation to generation about how to improve your own immediate safety and how to navigate hierarchy, in addition to other things, if you're just talking about how it relates to the two circuits before it. The fourth circuit, as described here, seeks to control the third circuit. And I don't know how far you can extend that pattern, but if you start thinking about the ways in which each circuit relates to the circuits before it, it is useful for understanding what's going on. So the fourth circuit talks about the third circuit, or it gets used to control the third circuit in this context. The fifth circuit is more like, I think he talks about it as being like ecstasy. Euphoria, he associates it with marijuana and the hippie movement and free love and tantra, that kind of stuff. So it's breaking away from what came before it, and it can be used to direct morality. If you're interested in creating like new social mores, which was a big part of the hippie revolution, is trying to create new ways of living, new forms of morality on the basis of love or joy or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so the labeling on this isn't totally clear until you read the paragraph that comes afterwards, but you're going to find that every circuit can be plotted onto the same Euclidean space. The first circuit is one-dimensional. You plot the first two circuits together, it makes two-dimensional space, like a Cartesian plane. You can go like up and down or left and right. Add the third circuit and it's three-dimensional. Add the fourth circuit and it's four-dimensional. So this, if you want to think about it that way, is a shadow of a four-dimensional figure. And mathematically, you can keep just plotting as many dimensions on there as you want. It just starts getting messy to look at. All right, so this image is titled Imprinting the Socio-Sexual Circuit. So let's read the paragraph right underneath of it, and then we'll discuss it. Okay, so it says, A and B represent socially good and socially bad sex according to the tribe. A1, A2, and A3 represent individual imprints. Personally good sex, what the individual is imprinted to like, and B1, B2, and B3, personally bad, what the individual doesn't like. If axis A1 to B1 is only slightly tilted, the individual is fairly normal in that society. If A2, B2 is tilted more, the individual is more neurotic in that society. If A3, B3 is tilted much further, the individual is a pervert in that society. So what I was describing earlier about graphing multiple dimensions is not what this image is, but it is applicable to one way to think about the circuits that was shown in the earlier chapters. So you see It's kind of like a circle. So A and B represent good and bad sex according to the tribe. So A1 through 3 represent the individual imprints, so the things that the individual likes. B1, B2, and B3 are things that the individual doesn't like. So the top half is things that the subject likes. The bottom half would be things that the subject does not like. So if the A1, B1 axis, so the one going diagonally left and right, I guess they both do, but B1 is bottom left up to the top right, is only slightly tilted, the individual is fairly normal. So you can imagine that these these lines could be tilted different amounts, depending on how much it deviates from what that tribe prefers or deems good. So ideally, these would line up directly with that line. It would all look like one line, but they can tilt up more and more until they come out of, so like A3. See how A3 is closer to the bad side of the graph? So someone who has this A3, B3 line right here going top left to bottom right, they're closer to liking whatever the society has deemed bad and not liking whatever the society has deemed good. It could even be totally reversed in some sort of weird scenario where someone was imprinted to just like everything that was taboo in their culture and to not enjoy any of the things that are socially approved sexual patterns. All right. So then down to page 135. So that page kind of broke it up a little bit, but we talked about the Knight of Disc representing Earth of Earth. And that was like the pure first circuit type, all sensation. On page 135, the Queen of Discs, or Earth of Water, is a mixture of first and second circuit traits. Sensational, viscerotonic, oral, and emotional, egotistic, political. You better be damn careful to call her Miss. The Prince of Discs, Earth of Air, is a blend of first and third circuits, oral demand and rational calculation, probably a very sharp and sharkish lawyer. The Prince of Discs, or Earth of Fire, is first circuit orality mixed with fourth circuit sexuality. This fusion of exhibitionism with inflamed eros means she's probably starring in porn movies, or in all disc cards, the first circuit predominates over the others. So you can notice that the fact that these are all the discs, we have the Knight of Discs, Queen of Discs, Prince of Discs, Princess of Discs. It sounds like he might be using the Crowley Thoth deck. Yeah, or I don't know. But yeah, so the disc is the main element, and then the thing that it is, the title, the Knight, Queen, Prince, and Princess, they're more like the second order. So they're all primarily of Earth, but Queen of Discs, that is like the watery aspect of Earth. Prince of Discs, that's the airy aspect of Earth. All right, so then we're going to look at the cups. So it says the Queen of Cups, or Water of Water, is emotion and territorial demand. Nelson Algren had her in mind when he said, "Never bed down with a woman who has more problems than you." The Knight of Cups, which is, I guess it's a little backwards from how I was saying it, but the Knight of Cups is water/earth, is emotion plus sensation, the pure predator, marauder, thief, rapist, or sociopath. The Prince of Cups, or water air, is emotion plus reason, the humanist, humanitarian, liberal, and ideal Unitarian minister. Princess of Cups is water fire, an explosive mixture of egotism and sexuality, Scarlett O'Hara, the femme fatale. The Princess of Swords is air, all pure, undiluted intellect. His feet never touch the ground. He lives amid floating abstractions, the monk scholar. The Knight of Swords is air earth, reason, and oral exhibitionism, the actor, orator, demagogue, and sometimes the artist. The Queen of Swords is air water, reason plus emotion. The greats in science and art are generally of this imprint group. The Princess of Swords is air fire, reason and sexuality. The good parent, usually the Puritan, but sometimes the crusader for sexual freedom. In any case, the motivating drive is an attempt to impose abstract reason upon the genetic imperatives of the mating urge. The Princess of Wands is fire, sexuality at its most powerful. These are usually, but not necessarily, quite promiscuous. Sometimes they pour all of their erotic energy into one mate and raise huge families, parenting being a strong part of the Fourth Circuit, e.g. Johann Sebastian Bach, who may have written the sexiest music in history, had 20 children. The Knight of Wands is fire earth, sexuality and sensationalism. The Playboy, Reich's phallic narcissist. The Prince of Wands is fire air, sexuality plus reason. These types are likely to get involved in the kind of empirical mysticism that is not tolerated by the local authorities, e.g. the Tantrists in India, the Knights Templar, and witches in medieval Europe. Aleister Crowley and Wilhelm Reich most recently. Crowley said that this card was a portrait of his true self. The Queen of Wands is fire-water, sexuality and emotional politics. The law courts have a steady parade of this type passing through every day. The clever Kabbalists who designed this pictorial key to the 4 primitive circuits include a clue to higher consciousness, for they teach that each element in traditional alchemy, earth, air, fire, water, corresponds to one of those tarot suits. Discs, swords, wands, cups, and one to each of the letters in the holy, unspeakable name of God, Yud-He Vav-He. The correspondences are as follows. So the Y is fire, wands, that's circuit 4, that's the first letter, and then we have that H, which is the water, cups, and then the second circuit. The water, cups, and the second circuit. The V there is air, swords, and the third circuit. And then the H is earth, discs, and the first circuit. Alright, the logic of this imagery is quite clear to the unconscious mind, and these associations appear frequently in dreams, as Jung documented in Psychology and Alchemy. Then it goes directly to that next image you see, where you have the Knight of Wands as being the first circuit, the oral narcissist, the natural child, the id. The bottom row is Freudian stuff. Then the Queen of Cups, second circuit, emotionalist, feeling, adapted child, ego. Prince of Swords is the third circuit, rationalist, reason, adult or computer. It's missing in Freud. The fourth circuit is the Princess of Discs, sex role, missing in Jung, parent, superego. Oh, okay. Did someone have a question?
I did, yeah. I'm a bit confused because from what you read earlier, it sounded like he associated princess with fire, which in itself is rather weird. But then looking at this diagram, it looks like the Knight of Wands. It seems like Knight is indeed of fire, and well, the rest kind of follows. But the previous pages seem to signify otherwise.
Yes, he is showing Princess as fire. I just scrolled up when you asked that.
Yeah, this is
But
pretty
let's
strange.
analyze this further. So, Knight of Wands. Let me see what he says for Knight of Wands. He says that's fire and earth. He associates that with the first circuit. And you're right, he did say that the Knight of Discs was like the pure first circuit. There is usually some sort of pattern here. So I was trying to see if there was like a masculine, feminine polarity thing because of fire and earth. But Queen of Cups is, yeah. So looking at it, I think I figured out what it is.
In the case of this diagram, well, it appears like each of those rectangles is supposed to represent a pure element, but at the same time, if we consider Knight to be earth, then that's actually earth of fire or fire of earth, whatever. So
I think,
how are we supposed to interpret that?
I think it doesn't matter all that much, but you'll notice that the first two have a knight and a queen and the wand and the cups. And traditionally, there are many rituals that involve wands and cups together because of the masculine and feminine polarity. And you notice that you have prince and princess with swords and discs, and those also have a tendency to be used together, the wand issuing energy into the cup. and the sword perhaps using the rationality to create ratios, cut things up on top of the disc. And you'll notice in some pentagram rituals, you actually draw the pentagrams, the pentacle, the disc, with an athame, or if I'm saying that right, a dagger, a knife. But you can analyze this enough to rationalize any sort of answer you want and be a cocaine monologue to go off of what Ra would say. Because you can just keep turning those symbols enough until you find an answer that satisfies you. All right, so we had just gotten through that list of things, and then now we're on page 137. Beneath the diagram where it's showing those 4 boxes, it says, the aim of the Kabbalah is to make the microcosm mirror the macrocosm. That is, to make the human being a perfect image of God. This means putting together the 4 alchemical elements symbolized by the letters YHVH. In other words, bringing the 4 circuits into balance. This is the same lesson as taught in the Buddhist mandalas, with 4 demons at the corners and the circle representing awakening in the middle. The married look, the mom and dad look, etc., which are not scientific concepts, but which everybody can recognize at once, have to do with an acute time sense. The parent is concerned not just with acquiring biosurvival tickets for personal nurture, but with acquiring tickets for the young and for the future. Behaviorists tell us wonderful stories about the intricate patterns that can be conditioned into experimental animals. See, they say, we have, by selective reinforcement, trained this rat so that at the sound of a bell, he runs up a ladder, presses button A, runs across a plank and down another ladder, presses button B, dashes across the cage and waits at the food slot for his meal to arrive. Lest anybody think this book is written from a perch of superiority, consider the similar but more complex behavior which the author followed for 20 years. He would set an alarm clock before sleep every night. When the alarm woke him, he would breakfast hurriedly, rush off to catch a bus, ride to a subway, change to the train, ride to an office building, rush through the lobby, board an elevator, ride to a certain floor, enter an office, and toil at repetitious and generally pointless tasks for 8 hours. This behavior sequence had been shaped, as B.F. Skinner would say, by reinforcement delivered every second week in the form of biosurvival tickets, money. These tickets were necessary to the biosurvival of 4 dependent children. The reader of this book can probably remember, somewhat dimly, the imprinting and conditioning of each of these circuits. We all began as infants in a one-dimensional world, orally hooked to mommy. The further away from mommy we crawled, the greater was our biosurvival anxiety. We generally returned to mommy as quickly as possible. The key imprint incidents of this period, together with associated conditioning, determine concretely how much we currently exhibit of anxiety or self-confidence. Let me see if I put this in here. Yep. Anxiety or self-confidence, rootedness or explorativeness, dependency or independence. Then, when the DNA sent the appropriate RNA messenger molecules to the glands, endocrine system, etc., a mutation occurred. Our gross morphology, our whole body, changed, and our minds changed in the process. That is, our reality tunnel dilated into 2 dimensions when we rose up and began to walk about the house and started learning who we could dominate, who could dominate us, who could be dominated, emotionally bullied, at some times and not at others. We developed out of amorphous biosurvival consciousness into stubborn individual ego. We were imprinted and conditioned with a particular style of emotional territorial politics. At this stage, we were imprinted and conditioned for dominance or submission, self-confidence or self-doubt, strong ego or weak ego, high pack status or low pack status, giving orders or taking orders, Herren moral or Sklav moral. Those last 2 are terms from Nietzsche. They're like master morality and slave morality, which ties into Hegel and is a whole other rabbit hole to go down. All right. We were subsequently conditioned to switch between these reflexes depending on whether the person we were dealing with was higher in the pecking order or lower in the pecking order. Middle-class people, e.g. Reagan conservatives, John Birchers, etc., will always revere those higher in the pecking order, and equally will always have some reason to persecute, peck at the poor who are lower in the pecking order. Hence they will say and even believe that they are being robbed by the poor on welfare who get about 4% of the tax dollar and never noticed that the military-industrial complex is getting about 72% of the tax dollar. This is normal mammalian sociobiology. After the second circuit reality tunnel is wired in, the organism molts and mutates again into the verbal stage, and a third circuit style of mentation is imprinted. That is, on top of protoplasmic consciousness and mammalian ego, we require human mind, which is created by and creator of human artifacts and speech. Feral children, who survived in isolation from society, artifacts and speech, have no mind in the human sense, which is why they are called feral. In the semantic stage of imprint vulnerability, we acquire either fluency or inarticulateness, dexterity or clumsiness, in quotes, good mind or dumb mind. And then there's a footnote which says, why do we say dumb, mute, for stupid? Because a good mind means a good mouth, and the human mind is a verbalizing circuit. At puberty, another DNA trigger fires, and RNA messengers initiate another morphological mutation of body-mind. The adult personality is imprinted and conditioned. We become moral or immoral, robot obedient or robot disobedient, solid citizen or sexual outlaw, parent or anarchist. Lack of understanding of these morphological changes and their persistence in imprint circuits in the brain is responsible for most failures in communication and for the general sense of exasperation with which we too often confront each other. Since everybody's imprints are a little bit different, the average is that which nobody totally is. Some footnote there again. James Joyce justified anarchism on the grounds that the state is concentric and the individual is eccentric. Back to the text. Since everybody's imprints are a little bit different, we all feel at times like the legendary Quaker who told his wife, all the world is mad but me and thee, and sometimes I wonder about thee. Reichians, disciples of Dr. Spock and Summerhill School, have called attention with some impatience to the brutality and stupidity of many of our traditional child-rearing methods. These methods are brutal and stupid only if, like the above-mentioned heretics, one regards the goal of child-rearing as the production of a sane, balanced, creative, not created, creative, human. This has never been the goal of any society in the real world. The traditional child-rearing methods are quite logical, pragmatic, and sound in fulfilling the real purpose of society, which is not to create an ideal person, but to create a semi-robot who mimics the society as closely as possible, both in its rational and its irrational aspects, both as the repository of the wisdom of the past and as the sum total of all the cruelties and stupidities of the past. Very simply, a totally aware, alert, awakened, unbrainwashed person would not fit very well into any of the standard roles society offers. The damaged, robotized products of traditional child-rearing do fit into these slots. That is, there is a neuro-sociological logic to the illogical. Are traditional schools very much like mini prisons? Do they stifle imagination, cramp the child physically and mentally, and run on various forms of overt or covert terrorism? Of course, the answer is unambiguously yes. But such schools are necessary to train people for roles in the ordinary office or factory or profession, which are also very much like mini prisons. They stifle imagination, cramp the person physically and mentally, and run on terror. The threat of loss of biosurvival tickets in the form of paychecks or tenure. The permissive movement in child-rearing appeared only when it did, and has succeeded only to a limited extent, because society has always needed and still thinks it needs human robots. Utopian child-rearing will advance further, necessarily only as society itself evolves out of authoritarianism. That is, as the accelerated changes now occurring propel us into the most rapid period of social evolution in all human history, we will then need citizens who are not robots, who are creative, who are not docile, who are innovative, who are not narrow-minded bigots, who are explorers in every sense of the word. Traditional child-rearing began to falter only when society began to enter into the present period of accelerated change and technological omni-transformation of all traditional values. Failures in communication generally derive from sending a message to the wrong address. That is, your husband has an ego problem and you send a message to his mind. Adapting a diagram from transactional analysis, what has happened is this. So you can see that these are the different circuits that are labeled. They've been given names. The fourth circuit is parent, third is adult or computer, second is adapted child, one is the natural child. And you can imagine these as people sending messages to each other. So I think it's the husband on the left who is very mind-oriented. Or, yeah, they're sending a message to the other person's mind. Okay, so the husband's on the right. So the wife sent a message to the husband's mind, and the husband is trying to send a message to the fourth circuit. Or maybe it doesn't match up exactly with what he said, but he's trying to show how you want to communicate on the same level as the other person. So if someone is talking about like mathematics and you start talking about emotions or hierarchy, unless the people are very interdisciplinary, it's probably not going to make sense to the other person. Or if you want to communicate with someone who's very concerned with hierarchy, that's probably how you should try to communicate with them. Meet people where they're at if you want to be an effective communicator. So we're on page 142. So there's an explanation. It says the message is addressed from circuit 1 to circuit 4. It means I feel weak. Help bolster me up. So they're talking about, and we're going to read this from right to left, so it's a little bit backwards. The person on the right, they're concerned about their like physical safety or something like that. They feel weak. We're talking about their immediate self. And they're making a moral comment about that fourth circuit, help me up. So they're making a moral statement based on their first circuit goings on. All right. And then if the answer comes back from circuit 3 to circuit 3, well, let's analyze the problem. There has been a wrong address. And I have to admit, I've seen that happen many times. Is like someone, they don't feel well, they don't feel safe, they're asking for help. One way to help can be the third circuit, but if that's not where the person is operating, it's not going to immediately help them unless you're able to scaffold them up the circuits from thinking about their immediate safety to getting them into that semantic mode of analysis and rationalizing. All right. Of course, this example is deliberately untypical, although not impossible. It is untypical because women traditionally are trained not to make this kind of mistake, to be emotionally sensitive, to be supportive. It is much more likely statistically that this kind of wrong address will go the other way, husband to wife. That is, the wife signals help, and the husband on the circuit 3 says, let's analyze this problem. We have said that the imprinting of the circuits contains a large element of accident within genetic parameters. Society everywhere, without understanding this theory, understands enough pragmatically about imprinting processes to attempt to program each individual for his or her assigned role. Hence, traditional girl rearing is different than traditional boy rearing, so that women will have more circuit 2 sensitivity. Again, women's liberation, like modern child rearing, arrived only when we were evolutionary ready or nearly ready for it. The traditional system worked in traditional societies. Similarly, class structure, like the caste structure in an insect hive, works to produce the right imprints in each class. The third circuit of the servile class or proletariat is imprinted chiefly from manual dexterity, while the same circuit in the middle class or ruling class children is imprinted for verbal, mathematical, or other symbol-using skills. Democracy has been less than a total success, and the intellectuals' half-shamed cynicism about democracy is justified, to the extent that traditional society did not need, could not use, and in many ways discouraged the development of high verbal, rational skills in the majority of the population. That is, concretely, most people are not encouraged to be very smart, and are rather heavily programmed to be comparatively stupid. Such programming is what is needed to fit them into most traditional jobs. Their biosurvival circuitry works as well as that of most animals. Their emotional territorial circuitry is typically primate, and they have little third circuit mind to verbalize, rationalize. Naturally, they usually vote for the charlatan who can activate primitive biosurvival fears and territorial, patriotic pugnacity. The intellectual looks at the dismal results and continues to believe in democracy only by an act of blind faith, similar to the way beliefs in Catholicism or communism or snake worship are maintained. Again, the traditional system works for a traditional society, A mass made of people who have intense curiosity about why Beethoven went in for string quartets after the Ninth Symphony, or whether Kant really refuted Hume satisfactorily, or what the latest quantum theories mean in relation to determinism and free will, is not a mass that will easily be led into dull, dehumanizing labor at traditional jobs. Why did Adlai Stevenson lose to Ike Eisenhower, George McGovern to Tricky Dicky Nixon? It was the wrong address problem again. Stevenson, McGovern, and other darlings of the intelligentsia are speaking to the Third Circuit, which is not very highly developed in most domesticated primates yet. Eisenhower, in his fatherly way, and Nixon, in his bullying Big Brother way, knew just how to push the right Second Circuit emotional territorial buttons to get a mob of primates to follow them. They were genetically programmed alpha males in ethological terms. Similarly, the moralist, i.e. the adult personality who has imprinted heavy ethical imperatives on Circuit 4, is often totally unable to communicate with the scientist or technologist. The moralist may even decide, many already have, that the scientist per se is inhuman. In fact, morals are fairly irrelevant to the Third Circuit analytical mind, which is the brain function the average scientist has imprinted most powerfully. To the Third Circuit, the only morality is accuracy, the only immorality is sloppy thinking. Again, the rise in social conscience among scientists is happening only when it was evolutionary necessary to happen, i.e. after Hiroshima. If it doesn't seem to be happening widely enough and quickly enough, the same can be said, also in error I think, about modernizing education and child rearing, about women's liberation, about racism, etc. The rebellion against all the follies of the past is succeeding and will continue to succeed only as we evolve into a society which needs each human to function well on all circuits. We are moving with ever-increasing speed into such a society. What the impatient radical forgets is that many of the injustices of the traditional primate society were not even perceived as such by the best minds of 1,000 years ago or 100 years ago, or in the case of institutionalized sexism, even 30 years ago. If we can see injustice and absurdity in many age-old institutions, it is only because we are evolving out of robothood, at precisely the point in evolution when it is necessary for us to become smarter and more sensitive on all circuits. Each of us has a favorite circuit, that is, a circuit that has been more heavily imprinted than the others. Miscommunication, misunderstanding, and general misjudgment of one another is vastly increased by the fact that few of us know about these levels of circuitry, and we all tend to assume that the person we are interacting with is on the same circuit we are. Thus, there are narcissistic, oral, first circuit types in every social group. Present them with a problem and they will immediately look for somebody else to handle it, since the oral stage is robotically imprinted for dependency. Or if they have imprinted hostile weakness instead of dependent weakness, they will explode into anger, infantile tantrum, raging that a problem exists and has been imposed on them. A second circuit type in the same situation will attempt to frighten the problem away by barking and blustering at it in mammalian fashion. A third circuit type will try to reason out of the problem. This is the best approach only with problems that are themselves rational, i.e., how do you make this machine work? It can be blind and futile when the problem is another human being, acting out one of the more destructive second circuit rage programs. The liberal is the one who leaves the room when the fight starts, somebody once said. Third circuit types are most confused and feel impotent when second circuit mammalian politics takes over the scene. A fourth circuit type will try to be rational, third circuit, and to sense the emotional dimensions of the problem, second circuit, but will basically try to impose a moral solution. Now this is the decent, fair thing to do. This may or may not make sense to the third circuit rationalist looking for objective justice, and it will usually make no sense at all to the totally second circuit type dominated by emotionalism and territoriality. What is true of the group is true of the individual. While we all have our favorite circuit and tend to see that circuit as superior to all of the others, we can be pushed out of it by shocks or stresses, in which case we jump to another circuit. The most robotic rationalist will descend to the first circuit eventually if threat to biosecurity is forcibly enough presented on the screen of consciousness. And if prevented from leaving the room when the fight starts, the rationalist will even descend to second circuit mammalian howling and barking under sufficient pressure. Oliver Wendell Holmes referred to this as the hydrostatic principle in controversy, whereby the fools drag everybody down to their own level. The most robotic emotionalist may also move up to the third circuit temporarily if a problem remains intractable to every form of emotional bullying or con artistry. All of us will move into the fourth circuit parent role or superego, even little children will do it imitatively, if it seems that the only way to get what one wants is to appeal to tribal morality. Why, it would be positively indecent not to do it the way grandfather would. Give us the child until he is 5, and we will have him for life, bragged some 18th century Jesuit. The Jesuit order of that time, as Aldous Huxley later noted sardonically, educated Voltaire, Diderot, and the Marquis de Sade. Obviously, the techniques of brain programming were not perfect. Nonetheless, most people and most societies do grow up as fairly accurate replicas of the previous generation. So most people grow up as accurate replicas of the previous generation. Most children educated by the Jesuits have remained Catholics. Most children of Democrats do not become Republicans. Consider the wide variety of philosophies available to us. Nudism and Buddhism, scientific materialism and snake worship, communism and vegetarianism, subjective idealism and existentialism, Methodism and Shinto. The fact that most people remain in the same reality tunnel as their parents does indicate that acculturation is a mind control process. We are all giants raised by pygmies who have learned to walk with a perpetual mental crouch. Unleashing our full stature, our total brain power, is what this book is all about. There is a Zen story, very funny, haha, about a monk who, having failed to achieve enlightenment, brain change, through the normal Zen methods, was told by his teacher to think of nothing but an ox. Day after day after day, the monk thought of the ox, visualized the ox, meditated on the ox. Finally, one day, the teacher came to the monk's cell and said, "Come out here, I want to talk to you." "I can't get out," the monk said. "My horns won't fit through the door." I can't get out. At these words, the monk was enlightened. Never mind what enlightenment means right now. The monk went through some species of brain change, obviously. He had developed the delusion that he was an ox, and awakening from that hypnoidal state, he saw through the mechanism of all other delusions and how they robotize us. Alright, that is the end of the chapter except for the exercises. I'll comment that "I can't get out" is probably a reference to the nature of ego in Buddhism. I know it's a lot of stuff. I'm going to scroll back up to the top of the chapter, and I'll do a summary of the most important points. Long chapter. Alright, so this chapter was the moral socio-sexual circuit. It was talking about the fourth circuit. It's saying that that circuit is imprinted at adolescence when DNA awakens the sexual apparatus, so during puberty. And then the first sexual signals, the first times that you're aroused, or your first kiss, first date, first girlfriend, first sexual experience, all of those things can be major imprinting moments. And then that has a tendency to influence the way your fourth circuit develops, how maybe it solidifies. It talks a little bit about Masters and Johnson, who did a lot of important early sexual research, I think in the 50s. That's a very interesting thing to read about. I'm not an expert on it though. And then he starts talking about how the fourth circuit, so we have some cultures have a lot of ordeals and rites of passage that are meant to control the desired traits, whatever that culture desired, for the fourth circuit imprinting of their individuals. But a lot of people get imprinted by accident. He mentions someone who had a police officer like barge in on someone who was having their first sexual experience and like shined a bright light in his eyes. He was at a moment of intense vulnerability, and it imprinted him in a way that led to impotence for him. And Masters and Johnson were able to help him resolve that. Robert Anton Wilson suggests that infants can play any skill, or can master any language, any skill, play any sexual role, but they become imprinted. They become more and more robotic as time goes on, assuming they don't try to undo themselves through this process of imprinting. Then we have the picture of the insect, where it's talking about how specialization is for insects. It's a good picture. And it's saying that we have a 4-stage life cycle, just like insects. Insects have egg, larva, chrysalis, adult. And there's this pattern of imprinting of the first 4 circuits in people as they grow up, and that pattern gets transmitted from generation to generation. Then there was a good summary picture of that, showing the first 4 circuits, when Robert Anton Wilson suggests their origin is in evolution, the imprint sites, and how they mapped onto other people's systems, talking about aspects of consciousness. He talks about how there are no taboos that are constant across culture, except the fact that all cultures have taboos, that we can't just, there has not been a major culture that just allows people to do as they please without any restriction. And it's suggested that those restrictions, is there a good image for that? Those restrictions are used to control inheritance, genetic drift, and future evolution, because by controlling the mating process of a culture, you are able to influence those things there. All right, the next couple pages are still talking about that. It mentions how, because whatever the average morality is for a culture, pretty much no one is actually average. They're all imprinted in ways that deviate from that idealized state. And we have the image of the person kneeling, illustrating how many religions offer a way for people to atone their inability to live up to whatever the moral ideal is in their context. The 4th circuit is associated with the adult personality or the parent. So there's someone who not only cares about themselves and how they relate to other people and maybe how they transmit information in the 3rd circuit, they care about their children and the imprinting of their children. And because they are concerned with how their children are imprinted and trying to control that, that is how Robert Anton Wilson is characterizing morality in the context of this book. And he also suggests that the 3rd circuit tends to become less utilized once you have children, because you just don't have time for that. It's very busy being a parent. And he also suggests that that's the reason why many sexually deviant people have a tendency to make major changes in culture or influence things, is because they have free time. They're not concerned about raising a child with whatever imprinting they've decided on. And connected to that, it's fairly common for religion or the priest caste to be concerned with decelerating the 3rd circuit in order to prevent drift away from whatever the current culture is. It's one way to characterize conservatism. Then it went through the different tarot attributions right here, and also the tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God. Am I seeing a laser pointer or something? I don't know, maybe it's just a glitch. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yes? Question? Okay, so we talked a little about tarot and the elements and like.
Oh no, I didn't have a question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Projective versus receptive, and yeah, so let's keep going from there. Then we got to these summaries of different ways you can be imprinted for the first 4 circuits. So like that top one there is the 1st circuit. It has more to do with like yourself, your immediate biosurvival safety. The 2nd circuit tends to be more about hierarchy, how you are in relation to other people and other groups. 3rd circuit is about manipulation of symbols and semantic skill, speech. And then the 4th circuit is about morality and how you condition yourself and other people. That took up a number of pages. And then he talks about how child rearing has been characterized as brutal and stupid by the Reichians and the Summerhill School. And he states that The goal of child rearing as the production of a sane, balanced, creative, not crated like trapped in a box, human being has never been the goal of any society in the real world. The real purpose of society is not to create an ideal person, but to create a semi-robot who mimics the society as closely as possible, both in its rational and its irrational aspects, both as the repository of the wisdom of the past and the sum total of all the cruelties and stupidity of the past. And then it mentions how people that manage to decondition themselves out of their robotized roles don't really fit into the roles that society offers. Then we had this diagram here where we're talking about how with communication, it's a good idea if you can to communicate on the same circuit that's relevant to how that person is in the moment. So this shows a couple where the husband had some sort of immediate thing they were asking for help. So they went from their first circuit needs to making a moral statement about help. And in the example he gave, the wife was trying to analyze the situation, break it down into parts, use the third circuit, which without scaffolding that husband up to being on the same level as her might not be very helpful. It might not make that person feel appreciated or loved or whatever it is. Then he talks a little bit about how, according to him, women at the time of writing were more imprinted onto second circuit sensitivity and less so with men. He talks about how we communicate, how politicians have a tendency to be successful if they focus more on the second and first circuits, and that if you focus on the third circuit, that's just not where a lot of people are at. I don't want to get too political in here, but you can see that probably in whatever countries you're from, in the behavior and the speeches of the politicians that you have observed. A lot of times the people that have very specific and well-considered and academic plans that are supported by research, it's just harder to sell that. So let's get a little bit further, and then we'll look at the exercises that he recommends for this chapter. And he repeats multiple times how the traditional system works for traditional society, but as society changes, the imprinting and the systems and the rituals that a culture has become less and less applicable if you don't update them. All right. That's a lot of it. I'm just scrolling because this is a long chapter and I don't want to miss anything in our summary. He talks about how even the most robotic rationalist, so third circuit person, will descend to the first circuit if in a state of immediate danger. And again, then it talks a little bit later about how a Catholic order said that if you gave them a child until 5, that they would be able to have that child for life, that they could imprint them into Catholicism for the rest of their life. But also plenty of transgressive writers have come from a background of Catholicism. Going a little bit further. All right, and then at the end there was just the Zen story about the monk who was told to meditate on the ox, and eventually he reached some sort of state where he had some kind of enlightenment. All right, so at the end we have our exercises. The first exercise says, recreate vividly in imagination your first orgasm. To what extent do you still use the same accessories, stimuli to turn you on? 2. Try to change your sexual imprint. See if you reach orgasm by some method that has been taboo or unthinkable to you before. So I want to bring up here that just because he mentions an exercise doesn't mean that you should necessarily perform it. These exercises will be useful to think about even if you decide not to do them. Not all the things that he recommends are necessarily safe or healthy because he talks about various substances, for instance, being related to different circuits. So take what he says with a grain of salt, think about it, don't necessarily do it. It's up to you to decide. You have ultimate responsibility for your consciousness, and that's actually like the main point of the book, is don't let anyone else be responsible for your imprinting, for what you are as a person. You should be, as much as possible, responsible for your imprinting, your conditioning, your values, that kind of thing. All right. Third one says, imagine that you are Reverend Jerry Falwell. Explain to an imaginary homosexual why his sexual imprint is sinful and should be changed at once. Include instructions on how to change it. Imagine that you are a gay man or lesbian. Explain to Reverend Falwell why you will not or cannot change your sexual imprints to him, or to please him. 5. Read Margaret Mead's Sex and Temperament in Three Primitive Societies, then write a 5-page proof that the taboos in our tribe make more sense objectively than the taboos of the tribes she studied. Be serious about it. 6. Choose the viewpoint of the Samoans in Dr. Mead's book above. Write a 5-page proof that their taboos make more sense than those of our society. Be serious about it. 7. Reread the paragraphs about the giraffe and the gosling. What does this tell you about your sexual imprint? What is your Jeep or ping pong ball? So looking at these exercises, I don't know how much of them we would want to discuss in the context of the VR Mystery School, but they are definitely things to explore and think about. They're an important part of your psyche. All right, so that is the end of the chapter. Do we have any last questions or comments? Yeah, but that was a good question. Oh, one other thing?
Yeah, I just thought of something, because I remember, I was thinking of this the other day, but like, how many circuits is there? So is there 7 or 8 that he talks about?
There are 8 circuits. I would suggest...
do you think that's like similar to like, I don't know, 7? I was going to say the chakra system, because like the root one is sort of like, you're placed in the world, isn't it? And then you move up.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, you could definitely map them together. There are people who have mapped the 8 circuits onto the chakras. Some people have tried to map it onto the Tree of Life. You can see him relating it to different tarot cards. You can probably connect it to planets somehow.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I thought that was interesting. I thought that the other day. I thought I wanted to mention it. So.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting exercise. So like the first circuit is probably the root. Yeah, I think that would fit. I think it would pretty much a map from 1 to 8, with the 8th circuit being the crown. But it would be worth investigating more to see to what extent it fits.
Hey, I thought it was only like a 7 chakra.
There are multiple chakra systems. Some people have like
there's that one higher one. I just remembered that. Yeah, those 8 circuits.
There are even some cultures where they use like 4 chakras, and there's some where there are like lots of tiny ones everywhere. I'm not an expert on it. So I'm gonna wrap it up because I also have to get going, but it's been good. And if you have questions, you can ask them in the Discord, and maybe someone will see them. I might get to it. I'm also in the Discord, or yeah. Okay. Thanks for coming to today's session. A recording will be up on YouTube in the coming days. Please join us again next week, same day and time. Follow what I do outside VRChat over at my Linktree. That's linktr.ee/elephantwords. So Linktree elephant words. If you haven't already, join VRM Discord. The URL's in the lobby. Consider supporting VRM by donating, supporting on Patreon, or becoming a volunteer. More information at vrmystery.school/support. This is the end of today's session, but feel free to mingle in the lounge.